When the DNA test results came in, I didn't even want to open the envelope. I'd already rehearsed every possibility, every excuse, every lie he might say next. But nothing could have prepared me for the words printed on that paper. Probability of paternity, 99.98%. That baby wasn't his cousin's. It was his. And in that moment, I realized the man I had built my life with had built another one too. My name is Amara, and for most of my life, I thought I was lucky in love. I met Daniel during my final year of university. He was charming, attentive, the kind of man who made everyone around him feel seen. He worked in finance, always crisp, always composed. I was a literature teacher, calm, idealistic, always searching for meaning in moments. Together, we felt like balance. We married after 3 years of dating. The wedding wasn't extravagant, just a quiet garden ceremony with our closest friends and family. His mother cried when I walked down the aisle. He said she was emotional because she always wanted a daughter. Now looking back, I wonder what exactly she was crying for. Our first few years were peaceful. We bought a small house in the suburbs, spent weekends at flea markets, and every Sunday morning, he made pancakes. He'd hum old songs while I sat by the window correcting my students' essays. I used to look at him and think, this is what stability feels like. After years of seeing friends' marriages crumble over money or infidelity, I believed ours was built differently, until the day she showed up. It started on an ordinary Tuesday. Daniel's phone buzzed while we were having dinner. He looked down, smiled faintly, and turned it face down on the table. I didn't think much of it. We all get work messages. But then it buzzed again, and every time, he silenced it without reading. When I asked who it was, he said, "Oh, it's just my cousin Leah. She's having some family issues." The name didn't ring a bell. In all our years together, he'd never mentioned a cousin named Leah, but he looked tired, stressed, so I let it go. Over the next few weeks, he seemed distracted, coming home late, smelling faintly of baby powder sometimes, and sometimes of perfume I didn't own. When I'd ask, he'd laugh softly. "Amara, you're overthinking again," he'd say. "You know how crazy work gets at quarter end." And for a while, I believed him, because love makes you patient, and sometimes, painfully blind. One evening, while folding laundry, I noticed a small stain on one of his shirts, something pale, maybe formula or milk. I teased him, "Are you moonlighting as a babysitter now?" He smiled a bit too quickly. "Oh, that's Leah's baby. I dropped by to help her fix her car, and she spilled some milk. Poor thing's been struggling since her husband left." The way he said it sounded rehearsed, a story smoothed over, too neat to question. But that night, as he slept, I stared at his phone on the nightstand, and for the first time in our marriage, I thought about unlocking it. I didn't. I wanted to be better than my suspicion. A few weeks later, I met Leah. It wasn't planned. It was fate's cruel sense of humor. I was at a cafe with my colleague when I saw Daniel across the street, carrying a baby. My heart softened, until I saw her, a woman about my age, standing close enough to brush his arm, laughing at something he said. They looked like a family, and for a split second, before he noticed me, I saw him smile at her the way he used to smile at me. When our eyes met, his face drained of color. He walked over quickly, voice trembling with casualness. "Amara, this is Leah. I told you about her. Her husband's abroad for work, so I've been helping her with errands." Leah smiled politely. The baby cooed, and something inside me, the part that trusted easily, went silent. That night, I asked him directly, "Daniel, is there something you're not telling me?" He looked almost offended. "Amara, come on. You think I'd cheat on you? With my cousin? That's disgusting." He said it like I'd insulted him. He even laughed at the absurdity of it, then pulled me close and whispered, "You're my only family that matters." I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. So I did. For a while, the messages continued, hidden, deleted, renamed under fake contacts. His temper grew shorter. His laughter became distant. One evening, I heard him on the phone in the garage whispering, "Don't worry, I'll bring the money tomorrow. Just keep it quiet until we sort things out." When he walked back inside, I asked, "Who were you talking to?" He hesitated, just for a moment, before replying, "Leah, her baby's been sick. She can't afford treatment, so I'm helping her out. You'd do the same if it were your family." He always used morality to end arguments, because he knew I'd never fight kindness. But kindness without honesty is manipulation. And one day, that manipulation cracked open in the most unexpected way. It's strange how truth doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it comes softly, through small cracks in routine. For me, it started with a birthday card. A few months after that cafe incident, I was sorting through the mail, bills, catalogs, and then a pastel envelope envelope addressed to Daniel, written in a woman's handwriting. There was a small cartoon baby on the front, and the words "Happy First Birthday, Little One." I wasn't snooping, it was addressed to our house. But when I opened it, my hands froze. Inside was a note. "Thank you for making our boy's first year possible. He looks just like you. Love, L and Baby J." I didn't have to guess who L was. The handwriting, the timing, the tone, it all fit together like puzzle pieces I'd been refusing to see. That night, I placed the card in front of Daniel during dinner. He didn't even look surprised, just tired, like a man who had been waiting for this confrontation. "Amara," he sighed, "you're misunderstanding again." He launched into his script, the same calm, controlled tone he always used when lying. "She's my cousin. She just meant I helped her out. She was thanking me." "Then why does the baby look just like you?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. He just pushed his plate aside and said, "I'm not doing this. Not tonight." And he walked away. That was the first night I couldn't sleep in our bed. I sat on the couch until sunrise, replaying every detail, every late meeting, every work trip, every time he'd come home with that faint smell of baby lotion. By morning, my chest felt hollow, but my mind was sharper than it had ever been. If I was wrong, I needed proof. If I was right, I needed to stop pretending I wasn't living in a lie. So I went looking. The first clue came from a hospital bill. He'd left it folded in his coat pocket. A bill for pediatric services under the name Leah Jansen. And the listed father's name? Daniel A. Cooper. My husband's full name. I couldn't breathe. I remember sitting on the floor of our living room, clutching that piece of paper, feeling like I'd swallowed something sharp. I wanted to call him right then, scream, demand answers. But instead I waited, because I wanted him to trap himself in his own story. That evening, I told him I wanted to meet Leah, face to face. If she was really his cousin, she wouldn't mind. He hesitated, then agreed. Too quickly. "Sure," he said, forcing a smile. "She'd love to meet you." But his eyes, they flickered with panic. We met 2 days later at a quiet park cafe. Leah arrived pushing a stroller, her hair tied back, wearing exhaustion like armor. The baby, his baby, had Daniel's eyes. I didn't even need a test to know. Still I smiled. Polite. "Come, Leah. I've heard so much about you." She seemed nervous. Her eyes darted toward Daniel, who sat stiff beside me, one hand gripping his coffee cup too tightly. Then something happened that neither of us expected. The baby reached for Daniel, arms outstretched, calling softly, "Dada." Every sound around us disappeared. Even the wind seemed to pause. Daniel froze. Leah's eyes filled with tears. And me, I just sat there, watching the life I thought I had unravel in real time. He tried to fix it, of course. That night he fell to his knees in the kitchen begging. "It was a mistake, Amara. It happened before we got married. I didn't want to lose you." But I remembered the hospital bill. The baby was 1 year old. We had been married for 8. "You didn't just cheat," I whispered. "You built a whole other life." He didn't deny it. He just wept, the kind of weeping that isn't regret, but fear of consequences. Over the next few days, the lies kept coming, little patches over a collapsing roof. He said Leah had tricked him, that she told him she couldn't have children, that he was only helping her emotionally. Each excuse sounded smaller, weaker, more desperate. Finally, I said, "Then you won't mind if we take a DNA test." The room went silent. He looked at me like I'd stabbed him, but I just smiled, cold and steady. "Let's prove your story." He resisted, of course. Told me it was insulting. Told me I was acting like one of those paranoid wives. But the next morning, he found the appointment notice on the fridge. I'd already booked the test myself. For him, for the baby, and for Leah. The test took less than a minute, just a cheek swab and a few signatures. Leah didn't argue. She looked almost relieved. I realized then that she had been living in her own kind of prison, the prison of being his secret. When we left the clinic, she whispered to me, "I'm sorry. I thought you knew. He said you were separated." I couldn't even be angry at her. We were both victims of the same man's lies, just wearing different rings. The results came a week later. Daniel wasn't home when they arrived. I sat at the kitchen table, the same place where we used to plan vacations, and opened the envelope with trembling hands. And there it was, the truth printed in black and white. Probability of paternity, 99.98%. I remember laughing, not a joyful laugh, a hollow, broken one, because after months of lies, the truth felt almost merciful. At least I finally knew what I was grieving, not just a marriage, but the illusion of honesty. That night, I packed a bag. I didn't scream, didn't throw things. I just left quietly, because some endings don't need fireworks. They just need clarity. People always imagine betrayal ends with shouting, with broken plates, or packed suitcases thrown out the door. But the truth is, sometimes betrayal ends in silence. A silence so deep, it makes every heartbeat sound like like a confession. When I left that night, I didn't go far. I checked into a small guest house on the edge of town, one of those quiet places where no one asks questions. I didn't cry right away. I just sat on the bed, staring at the wall, wondering how a decade of love could vanish in a single envelope. The next morning, I sent Daniel the photo. The DNA results, clear, undeniable. No words, no accusations, just proof. He didn't reply for hours. Then one message appeared. Please don't ruin my life, Amara. We can fix this privately. Privately. That word hit me harder than any insult, because his whole double life had been built on privacy. For days, I replayed everything in my head. His calm smile, his mother's sudden coldness toward me last year, the way Leah's baby clung to him. Everyone must have known, or at least suspected. Everyone but me. And that's when the numbness turned into something sharper. Not hatred, not rage, just resolve. If he wanted things to stay private, I'd do the opposite. I'd raise the truth louder than his lies. I started with his family. I called his mother, the woman who used to call me my daughter. When she answered, her tone was distant, polite. Amara, I heard you and Daniel had a disagreement. Don't make things bigger than they are. I smiled sadly. I'm not making them bigger, Mother. I'm just telling the truth. And I sent her the DNA report. There was a long silence on the other end of the call, then a soft gasp. Oh my God, he promised me it was just gossip. I didn't need to say anything more. For once, the shame wasn't mine to carry. Next came our friends. For years, Daniel had played the role of the perfect husband, charming, helpful, adored at dinner parties. So when I quietly updated them on why I left, their disbelief turned into whispers, and whispers into outrage. I didn't post about it publicly, but I didn't protect him either. When people asked, I told them the truth, calmly, without drama, because sometimes revenge doesn't need fire, it just needs clarity shared out loud. But the real reckoning came at his workplace. Daniel worked for a private firm that valued reputation almost more than profit. They had family networking events, charity galas, all built on the illusion of trust. So when the HR manager called me, saying Daniel had listed one dependent child, I didn't lie. I simply said, I think you'll need to update that number. By the end of that week, his world began to collapse, quietly, precisely, the way he had built it. His mother stopped defending him. His boss questioned his integrity. And Leah, she finally told her side too. Leah called me one evening, her voice trembling. Amara, I didn't know you were still with him. He told me you moved abroad. Her honesty disarmed me. I could hear the same exhaustion I felt, the fatigue of being manipulated by someone who thrived in lies. I don't blame you, I said softly. He fooled both of us. But you have something I don't, a child. Protect him from this mess. She started crying. I don't even want him in our lives anymore, she said. Just thank you for showing me who he really is. For the first time, I realized I wasn't the only woman trying to heal. We were both pieces of the same broken truth, and somehow, that made it easier to breathe. Meanwhile, Daniel's messages grew more desperate. I'm sorry. It didn't mean anything. Please, can we talk? I didn't reply. There's a point when words lose meaning, when sorry feels like dust. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my quiet. I went back to teaching, moved into a small apartment closer to school, and started therapy. My counselor asked, what would closure look like to you? I said, it's not about him losing. It's about me not feeling small anymore. But closure, it seemed, wasn't done testing me. 2 months later, Daniel showed up at my door. He looked thinner, worn out. The confident man I once knew replaced by someone uncertain, humbled. He held a box in his hands. These are your things, he said quietly. Then softer, I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know I'm sorry. I let him talk. He said he missed me, that he'd ended things with Leah, that he wanted to start fresh. When he finished, I asked one question. Would you have told me the truth if the test hadn't proved it? He hesitated, and that silence, that tiny pause, was my final answer. I smiled gently. You were never sorry for what you did, Daniel, only for getting caught. Then I closed the door. After that day, he stopped trying. Mutual friends said he'd moved to another city for work, trying to start over. But I didn't care. For me, starting over wasn't about geography, it was about peace. And for the first time in years, I felt it. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail, no return address. Inside was a photo of the baby now, walking, smiling. Leah had written just 2 words beneath it. He's happy. I smiled, because in a strange way that child, the symbol of my heartbreak, had also become the symbol of truth, a truth that set both of us free. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't look like victory speeches or dramatic transformations. Sometimes, it just looks like waking up and realizing your heart doesn't ache the same way it used to. Months passed, the seasons shifted, and so did I. The first thing I learned about healing was was that it doesn't begin with forgetting, it begins with remembering differently. I used to replay everything Daniel did wrong, every lie, every excuse, every moment I ignored my instincts. But one morning as I poured my coffee, I realized I no longer wanted revenge. I just wanted peace. I started doing small things for myself again, things I had unconsciously stopped doing when I was someone's wife. Long walks before sunrise, fresh flowers in my kitchen, reading poetry out loud to no one but myself. Each little ritual reminded me that I existed outside of that marriage, that my worth wasn't tied to being chosen or loved or lied to. At school, my students noticed I smiled more. One of them, a sweet girl named Talia, once asked, "Miss, do you ever miss your old life?" I thought about it for a moment and said, "Sometimes, but I don't miss who I was in it." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" I smiled. I used to think love meant believing everything someone said. Now I know it means believing myself, even when someone else tries to convince me I'm crazy. She nodded slowly, like she understood more than her age should have allowed. A year after I left, I decided to visit the town where Daniel and I had first met. It wasn't nostalgia, it was closure. The cafe where we'd had our first date was still there, though the chairs were a little more faded. I ordered the same drink, a cappuccino with extra cinnamon, and sat by the window. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I just felt gratitude, because that version of me, the young, hopeful Amara, was brave enough to love. And the woman I became, the one sitting alone now, was brave enough to walk away. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, I found myself near the park where I'd first met Leah and her baby. I didn't expect to see them, but there they were, by coincidence or maybe quiet destiny. The little boy was running now, laughing, his curls bouncing as he chased a ball. Leah spotted me and waved. There was no awkwardness, no bitterness, just a calm, shared understanding between two women who had both survived the same lie. She walked over, smiling softly. "He's growing fast," I said. "Too fast," she replied. "But he's happy. We both are." We stood there for a moment, watching him play. Then she said something that stayed with me. "I used to think that truth destroys families, but sometimes, it just reveals the ones that were never real." I nodded, because she was right. That night, I went home and wrote a letter, not to Daniel, but to myself. It said, "You loved honestly, you trusted completely, and when the truth came, you faced it with grace. That is not weakness, that is strength." I folded the letter and placed it inside the same box that once held my wedding ring, but instead of feeling loss, I felt lightness. Sometimes I still wonder what became of Daniel. Maybe he's changed, maybe he hasn't, but it doesn't matter anymore, because his story stopped being my responsibility the day I chose truth over illusion. Healing, I've learned, isn't about finding closure with them. It's about finding peace within yourself. Now every Sunday morning, I still make pancakes, just for me. I sit by the same window where I used to watch him cook and smile to myself. The silence that once felt unbearable now feels sacred. It's mine. And when I look back at everything, the lies, the DNA test, the heartbreak, I realize something. The truth didn't destroy me. It freed me. You know, sometimes we spend so much time trying to protect people from the truth, we forget that the truth is what protects us. So if you're listening to this, and you've ever been gaslit, doubted, or told you were crazy for sensing something was wrong, remember this. You don't need proof to trust your own intuition, because the moment you start believing yourself again, that's when healing begins.